Palm Sunday is a bigger deal. It's the triumphal entry of Christ. Some people wonder if it's really on Sunday, but it doesn't matter. What we call Palm Sunday is very big in God's calendar. It's the end of this period of his plans for Israel. And it ended when they, as it were, rejected Jesus as their king. They rejected him. And so following that, the time clock stopped, but Christ was crucified and Jerusalem was destroyed. And there's an indeterminate amount of time. It's called an interval. It's just, God says, 69 weeks, 1 week. And so that's going to enforce a covenant for 7 years. And in the middle of the 7 years, the middle of the week, he shall cause the sacrifice and oblation to cease, and for the overspreading of abominations he shall make it desolate, even until the consummation and determination will be poured out in the desolate. I mean, all that is saying is everything that it chronicles. When you look at Revelation 13, and you see this Antichrist coming, and this image he sets up of himself, and the breaking of the covenant and tricking the Jewish people who were trusting in the false Messiah. First seal is a white horse. The first event that the Lord unfolds for us is the rise of this man that is the ultimate Superman. In every way, super intellect, super communicator, super mesmerizer of audiences. I mean, Hitler could keep the Munich stadium absolutely mesmerized with his orations and his everything he did. This fellow will be able to mesmerize not just Munich or Germany. He will mesmerize the world. So that led us to the second question: where does this term 7-year tribulation come from? It's right there. It's this idea that God had 483 years, or 69 heptads that ended, and there's this interval, but the last section, the last week, the 70th week, is 7 years long. And this 70th week period is called the tribulation, or as it says in chapter 6 on, at the end of 6, the Great Tribulation. Now, this is something that we're going to cover tonight. There is a prophesied 2-chapter event in Ezekiel that describes the Magog invasion of Israel. You notice this and this and this? It's not clear in the Bible when it takes place. And so what we're going to do tonight is just, it's understand what's going to happen, understand the participants, but we don't know if it falls right here before the tribulation. It could actually happen. It isn't clear whether it happens, sometime in like near the time of Armageddon, anytime during the week, before the week. It's just not clear, and I'll show you why. But what we do know is that there's a rebuilt temple in this time period, because in the center, at the 3.5-year mark, right here, right in the center of the tribulation, the Antichrist defiles, sets up the image of himself, and breaks the covenant and all the things we read about in Revelation. So this is where the 7-year tribulation comes from. It's that 70th week that is culminated by the Battle of Armageddon and the second coming of Christ. And that launches into the personal direct rule of Christ called the millennium. Okay, now what's interesting, go to Daniel 10. I want to show you something, because I wanted to throw this in because someone mentioned it. It's probably they were reading Peretti books or something, I don't know. But look in Daniel 10, because where did this idea of spiritual warfare on a global scale come from? And sometimes we in our reading this, we don't really notice some of the things that it's talking about. First of all, in Daniel 10, if you read the whole chapter, you see that Daniel is fasting for 3 weeks. Now, that immediately, when Jesus' disciples confronted very powerful demon situation, Jesus said to them, "This kind cometh not but by" what? Yeah. "This kind cometh not but by," remember, God always puts this word first, "and fasting." Prayer in God's book is always first. But we will give ourselves to prayer in the ministry of the word. "This kind cometh not but by prayer and by fasting." And so prayer is a reference to our seeking God. Fasting is us denying ourself, our flesh. The idea of that I am so weak, I need to seek God's strength, and my flesh is so strong, I need to deny it. So first I start seeking the Lord, and then I start, denying the enemy within, the traitor, my flesh. So Daniel is already seeking the Lord, and he goes into this 3-week fast, and the Lord dispatches a messenger to him. But for the whole fasting period, the prince of the kingdom of Persia. Now, you know what's so interesting? Movie makers read the Bible. I mean, that was a movie a while back, The Prince of Persia. And I thought, do they know what they're talking about? Because there is a demon that is behind this moment, what the Persians are doing in their hatred of Israel. And it is so interesting to think about the dark side. What we don't even realize so much of it's not just nation states buying, hypersonic missiles and Israel intercepting them and blowing them up last week. There's so much more going on the spiritual realm. That God, interestingly enough, in this chapter is one of the only places in the Bible, other than Job 1 and 2 that we've already looked at, pulls back for a moment the curtain, because he wants us to know that there is so much going on, that this is why the Bible says God is watching over his word to perform it. Because Satan doesn't understand the Bible and doesn't know what God is doing, but he's going to try and stop it at every hand. And so there is this higher level of warfare. And so this prince of the kingdom of Persia, this order of demon creatures, remember Paul describes 7 orders of demons, principalities and powers, and he goes through all these spiritual wickedness in high places when he's talking about it. And if you add them up with the ones that are in the Old Testament, it appears that there are 7 orders of demons that reflect the 7 orders, cherubim and seraphim and the archangel, Lucifer that was the anointed cherub. 4 right off, top, plus normal angels. So, but until Michael, and Michael is the one that seems to always be the defender of God's chosen people of promise, the Jews. So Michael comes in, and this messenger that's on his way to Daniel is hindered by this being. So Michael comes and assists this angel to get to Daniel. And after that messenger gets to Daniel, this angel, and gives him chapter 11 and 12, he will have to deal with, and here's another one, appears to be one of these hierarchy of demons that is influencing the nation of Greece. So all that to say, in a little while when we're looking at the maps, we think of armies and soldiers and political leaders, and God sees overlaid over all that. Satan is just like in Job. Satan incited the Sabaeans to go and attack Job's flocks. Satan incited, and if you read, Satan can actually incite people groups to terrorize and kill and fight and war. He can drive them, just like the demon of Gadara, the demonized man. Now, this is God explaining his intentions. And this is what he says. Therefore, say to the house of Israel, verse 22, thus says the Lord God, I do not do this for your sake, O house of Israel, but for my holy name's sake. You see, Israel right now is an unwilling partner in this enterprise. God says, I am not protecting Israel from the whole world against them for Israel's sake. I'm doing it for my sake. See, that's what's shaping up in our world. There is an entire group of people, 1.2 billion of them, who at the core of their belief system believe in the inferiority, the destruction of, and the resist in every way the Jewish people, and that's Islam. Islam is focused from its core against Israel. And God said, I am going to protect Israel, not for Israel's sake. They are by nature quite proud people. They are by nature, sometimes mistreating people around them because they've been mistreated so much. God is not vouching for the righteousness of the nation of Israel. When God does Ezekiel 38 and 39, he's not doing it because they are the most good Samaritan, helpers of the poor in the world. He's doing it. I don't do this for your sake, so house of Israel, but for my holy name's sake. You see, when God makes an eternal covenant, when he sovereignly elects, he doesn't unelect. And God sovereignly elected Israel. That's the literal lineage of Abraham, not the spiritual descendants of Abraham. That's us. We are not Israel. Israel is Israel, and God has a very clear plan for them, which you have profaned among the heathen whither you went. See, the Jews have profaned the name of God among the heathen. They are God's chosen people of promise, and they denied their king when he came, Jesus Christ himself. So, and I will sanctify my great name, which was profaned among the heathen, which you have profaned in the midst of them. And the heathen shall, and this is one of the most repeated, in fact, it is the most repeated statement in the book of Ezekiel. Shall know that I am the Lord, shall know that I am the Lord, shall know that I am the Lord. The whole purpose of what God is doing with Israel is to show the world that he's the Lord. By the mid-20th century, they became a recognized nation called Israel. So chapter 37 actually has happened in some of your lifetimes, and it's in recent history for the rest of us. This happened in 1948, that the bones came together, and there was this nation of Israel. Then, that what happened, 48 started Israel, 56 was the Great War, where all the Arabs decided they were going to get rid of them after 8 years. Then 67 was the next Great War, 11 years later, and all of the world watched as they thought Israel was going to be annihilated. And Israel defeated the combined armies of all those nations. This is all history. But look at chapter 38, because directly following this description of this nation of Israel, all of a sudden we have Ezekiel 38. It follows the description of this return of the nation Israel to becoming a country. And in Ezekiel 38 and 39, there's a war described by God through Ezekiel's eyes that features armies coming from what we would describe as an Islamic coalition. Now remember this, Ezekiel is talking from the context of 2,600 years ago. So he's going to describe places that were geographically recognizable 2,600 years ago. And if you get an old map, just find a map that describes what the world was like pre-Rome and the modern times, and look back at the ancient world, and what you find is Ezekiel is picking out geographic sites that are still identifiable on the map. And if you look at that, today, see what's neat about the Bible is it takes a place from then to identify a geographic location. If you overlay today's geopolitical map over it, you find that everywhere Ezekiel describes would be an Islamic nation or Russia. Every one of them. So we call it an Islamic confederation allied with what today we call Russia. But back then they were the Scythians, and there are a lot of other words in there. This event is described, this war, starting in chapter 38. Look what it says, Ezekiel 38:1. Now the word of the Lord came to me saying. So we know this is going to happen because God's saying it, the word of the Lord. That's code for God says. And if God says, it's going to happen. Son of man, verse 2, set your face against Gog in the land of Magog, and the prince of Rosh, and Meshach, and Tubal, to prophesy against him. And thus says the Lord, and he keeps going down. And look at verse 5. This is what I keep talking about, the leader of the band. Verse 5, Persia. That's Iran. They're the start of this list that's coming against Israel. So basically, 38 and 39 describe a massive attack launched against whatever the nation is in 36 and 37. 36 and 37 clearly describes Israel. 38 and 39 clearly describes Israel being attacked from without by what we would say in the 21st century an Islamic coalition. So the first question we have is, when would this happen to be? And so you do a Bible study. Over the years, various Bible teachers have looked. Look at what it says in verse 2, Gog and Magog. So obviously there are two unusual words you can search in the Bible. And what you find is that there are 3 times Gog and Magog occur in the Bible. So we have to identify when exactly would this chapter 38 happen. The first place that Gog and Magog show up in the Bible is in Revelation chapter 19. And 19:11 through 21 say that Gog and Magog come up in a battle called Armageddon. But the interesting thing is that Armageddon is seen to be at the end of the 7-year time of trouble that's called the tribulation. And when the battle of Gog and Magog and Armageddon ends, the world as we know it ends. There's no 7 years of, if you read Ezekiel 38, after this war, they're cleaning up for 7 years after the war of chapter 38 and 39. They're burying people for 7 months. There's so many people that are killed in this war, it takes 7 months to build massive graves and get all the bodies in it and cover them up. And then it says it takes them 7 years of reclaiming all the stuff from the battlefield and using it. They're actually burning it and using the war gear. So this can't be Revelation 19:11 through 21. This could not, Ezekiel 38 cannot be the Battle of Armageddon. If it is, then God is making a conflict there. And so what we know is that the Bible never conflicts itself. And so if you look at it at Revelation 19:11 to 21, the Battle of Armageddon, you see it clearly ends with Jesus Christ coming in the clouds at the head of the heavenly armies as the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, and he says enough is enough, and he just ends it all and sets up his kingdom. So we know it's not then. What's the other time Gog and Magog show up? Well, it's just the next chapter in Revelation 20:7 through 9. And Ezekiel is not describing that Gog and Magog, because that Gog and Magog is at the end of what we call the millennium. Now, the word millennium is never in the Bible, but the number 7 times of 1,000 years is. And the Bible describes a period of time 1,000 years long 7 times. To have tranquility in your life is to get a heart transplant. That's what God does. The new birth is not joining a church or getting baptized or, repeating a prayer after me. It's when God gives you a new operating system. When he reaches in and takes out the old stony, as it's talking about in 26 and 27, and puts a brand new operating system in us. We are brand new from the core of our being. We have a brand new orientation in life and spiritual life. But that, in fact, if you want to, it says hastening the day of the Lord. You want to hasten the day of the Lord, lead people to the Lord. Because you hasten when the last one that he has chosen for this time period to be saved, boom. Then he takes his church out, and it starts that 70th week.